What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video. Thank you as always for tuning in. I hope you are as happy as me that this thing started. That's such a huge milestone for this car, at least for me. I'm really happy, relieved about that. But we still have a ton of work to get done. As always, you know, this was a pretty big project. Where we left off last time, we're gonna jump into the interior here. You saw I got the pedals all done. You may have noticed I removed the seats. That was just to get a bit better access to that. If you've ever worked under the steering wheel or in the footwell area of a car, you know it's a terrible place to be, especially with the seats in. So I figured I'd pull those out. I'm gonna vacuum up in here, clean things up. And while I've got the seats out, I wanna pull the center console. So let me get that out and I'll show you guys why. All right, with the center console out, we can see what we're working with here. And the issue at hand is the large hole for the transmission. Now I have a factory little rubber boot here that would normally seal this off. You can see it goes into place, but it leaves that open. And there's no holes for this since it doesn't really line up where it's supposed to. So we're gonna drill some holes for this guy to mount, and we're gonna do something about that. So all I'm doing here is drilling a small hole into the sheet metal. And then I've got these screws here. These I think were out of the fender liner or something like that. Just a decent coarse thread, decent size, a nice large surface area at the top. That way it's got a neat, good place to bite into. But before I get this front done, like I said, I'm gonna do something about the hole here. Aluminum tape to the rescue again. Holes drilled, screws in. Pretty much looks OEM. Okay, if you were into cars in like the late 2000s, you probably had one of these. The crystal shift knob. I had to do it. Paying homage to one of my first cars, my Scion XB back in like 2008, 2009. If you know me from back then, you're a true OG, and I always had the craziest crystal shift knobs in that car. So little tribute to the first car that kind of got me into things. All right, I'm gonna keep the workup on the interior going. So let's tackle this next job, which involves taking this steering wheel off. So to take the steering wheel off on a Z, you can see it's this Torx bit, looks like a star, but it has a little thing in the middle, and you need one of these specialty tools. See how it's got a little hole in the middle there? And this is a T30. So let's get those little screws off. With the screws out, we can pull the airbag out. It's just two little plugs on the back here, and then it pops right out. With the airbag off and out of the way, I got this nut loose just by using the impact. It's a 19 mil, but you'll see I'm gonna leave it on, and that's so I can pull the steering wheel off without hitting myself in the face with it. All right, we've got a steering wheel hub on. This is just a like Amazon brand. It was one that had pretty good reviews, and it was like medium priced. I wouldn't get the super cheap $15 ones, but this one was about half the price as a name brand, and it got a ton of great reviews, and honestly, it looks pretty decent quality. And the fact that it has provisions for the factory clock spring and this wiring and stuff is great. I'm not gonna use this wiring for anything, but it's nice to retain it as opposed to just ripping it all out. Okay, got half of the NRG quick release on. I've just got to go get the steering wheel and we'll put the other half on. Check that out. Now the steering wheel is probably older than the car itself, but I am a sucker for an old school Nardi classic, and it just looks so good in there. And we're back. It's Saturday, my only day off this week, and we're gonna keep the work going inside the car. And I'm gonna tackle a job that I've really been putting off for a while, and that's finishing the clutch pedal installation. It's in, it works, it's functioning, but it's not strong enough. Let me get under here and I'll show you what I'm talking about. All right, we are up under the dash here. let me show you what the issue is. So this is the brake pedal, and you'll notice it bolts to the chassis at the top. That's for extra rigidity. Now, clutch pedal's over here, and you'll see there's a hole, but there's nowhere to bolt it to. Now, again, it works. I could leave it, but that's gonna mean that there's some wiggle in this clutch pedal. And if I'm drifting this thing, clutch kicking all over the place, that's not good. So I need to fab up some kind of mount to get this thing to bolt to here. Well, I think I came up with a solution to get this pedal mounted to the chassis. Let me pull the pedal out and I'll explain it to you. So the clutch pedal bolts into the car like this. I made this little metal bracket here, really simple, just a piece of kind of thick sheet metal bent in 2 spots. I'm gonna weld it onto the pedal just like that. And then now we've got a little bracket that I can bolt to the chassis. And I've got a cool new tool that I'm gonna show you when we actually get to the part of bolting this guy in. So let's weld this on the pedal, take it from there. Okay, we got the bracket all welded on. Doesn't look too terrible. I'm gonna dust a little bit of paint on that just so it doesn't rust, and then we'll get it tossed in the car. Wow, just ignore that. Success! I just bolted the pedal back in to make sure that this fits, and you can see right there where I labeled top. That's the top of our bracket, and that hole I drilled is where I'm going to put a riv nut in. Might be kind of difficult in this cramped space, but I'm excited to try a riv nut tool out, or riv nut gun, whatever they're called. New tool! I have wanted a riv nut tool for a long time. I just think they're such a useful thing, and I'm really excited to give it a shot. If you've never used one before, you basically just drill a hole the size of the riv nut itself. So this is one that you would use for a 12 mil bolt. I believe it's an M8, it's the size. So I'm gonna drill a hole for this, and then you pretty much just wedge this whole tool, or not the whole tool, but this part in the hole that you drilled. Open this guy up, pop it in the hole, and then you'll clamp it down, and that's gonna squish this little guy. And just like a rivet would, right? It's gonna squish this thing, create a little like a collar on the inside of the metal, and it should give you a nice threaded little insert to put a bolt. So let's see if it'll work in the super tight space that I'm dealing with here. Okay, so this is the back side. You can kind of see what I was talking about, how it flares out that little bit. It gives it something to bite on. So now I've got a threaded hole for that bracket we built on the pedal to bolt onto. So let's toss the pedal in and cross our fingers that it actually lines up. It worked. It actually lines up and bolts up perfectly, almost like OEM. Let me show you guys. All right, back under here, there is the bracket we made and a bolt in there, and it all lines up so good. And this thing is so much more solid than it was without anything on it. Super happy with the results of this. The next project on the list is getting the Clutch Master Reservoir mounted. So these cars from the factory have a remote reservoir, meaning the master is down there, and then there's a little rubber line that runs up to the reservoir. Now, I wasn't able to source an OEM reservoir, which is kind of a bummer, but this is a aftermarket one, a Willwood one. And now I've just got to figure out how to mount it and where to mount it. All right, this is officially the ugliest thing I've ever made. I welded 2 nuts on the back with the worst welds on the planet. Absolutely terrible. The welder was kind of acting funky, and my hood wasn't auto darkening, so it was like impossible to see what I was doing. But whatever, you won't see any of it. You might see some of this super ugliness, but let's toss it in the car. I'll show you what this is even for. Okay, I tried to film the process of getting this riv nut in, but I had the camera facing at basically nothing, so that clip didn't really turn out good. But hey, there's a riv nut installed. Let's get this terrible looking bracket in and get the Clutch Master Reservoir on. All right, as ugly as this bracket is, you're not really gonna be able to see it, and that reservoir is in there, and it's pretty solid. Overall, B minus. So before I bolted the reservoir and that goofy little bracket in, I tossed the clutch light on. Let me show you that. So the line, you can see bolts right onto the master there, and then it slips down that little hole down there, and then comes in to the fender well. And I'm gonna get some like P-clamps and secure that so it's at least safe. And then it runs under there, and I haven't hooked it up to the transmission yet, or the slave cylinder rather. I'll handle that another day, but at least it's in the right spot. Okay, if I'm being honest, that job took so much longer than it should have, but it's done. We've got our master mounted, nice and secure. Put a little bit of paint on the bracket, so it doesn't look terrible. It is connected with this rubber hose to the master down there, and we've got our clutch line ran. Like I said, I just have to connect that to the slave, which I'll tackle another day, but at least I can check this off the list. I've been dreading this job for a while, just because I knew that little bracket, this little thing, was not going to be the easiest to make, and I wasn't really sure how I was going to mount it, but overall I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. Well, with the line on, the next step would be to connect it to the slave cylinder, bleed the clutch, make sure it works, but I can't find the stupid little banjo bolt that bolts the line onto the slave cylinder. I think the previous owner lost it or maybe never had it, who knows. Either way, I've got one on the way, which means we're gonna have to put that job off until it shows up. So that's gonna be a wrap for today's video. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and make sure you're subscribed. Catch you in the next one. See ya.